first of all, I should tell you that my name is Ruth Steinberg. I know many of you, but I don't know all of you. I am the Jewish Family Service Director at Santa Barbara, Jewish Family Service and Jewish Federation. I am also have the amazing honor to be the director of our Portraits of Survival Holocaust program, which is a permanent exhibit of local Holocaust survivors and also an educational program of local survivors. Zoom, as we know, in these trying, interesting times, offers some challenges, but also many opportunities, as our wonderful
Violins of
guest
Hope
reminded
for
me,
Holocaust
because it offers
Remembrance
many
Day
opportunities to be together. The first thing I want to remind us
Holocaust
all is
Remembrance
that
Day is
please mute
today.
yourself, because I'm hearing a lot of background noise from everyone. And the mute button, of course, it's on your far left. If you could just mute your microphone, since there are many of us. And I just want to remind everyone that there are many moving parts to tonight, so it may not always be smooth, but it will be wonderful. And so we ask that you're patient. Just like things don't always go smoothly in person, they may not go smoothly on Zoom, but I do promise you a very interesting, wonderful, inspirational evening. And I'm just very happy that you're here. The other thing is, if you have questions or comments that you want to make later in the hour, we hope to have some time for that. So you're welcome to put those into the chat box, which is located in the bottom of your screen, and put those in, and we will get to those a little bit later. So I just want to start out by saying welcome again to you all on this Yom HaShoah evening, Holocaust Remembrance evening, as people around the world gather together to remember. We are a people who remembers. And I think it's a very powerful thing that we remember. And I want to make a couple of comments about memory, because I think it's very relevant to this evening. Britain's former chief rabbi, one of my favorite people who passed away this year, by the way, Chief Rabbi Lord Jonathan Sacks, spoke a lot about memory. And I just want to read something that he said about that, because I think it's very relevant. And so it has been throughout Jewish history. We carry with us all the fragments of our people's past, the broken lives, the anguished deaths. For we refuse to let their deaths be in vain. They, our past, live on in us as we continue the Jewish journey to the future, to hope and to life. And so it is.
He's muted.
Ruth, you're muted.
Ruth is muted.
Very sorry about that. So everyone take a moment and just make sure that your microphone is muted. So sorry about that. And so it is with the victims of the Shoah, the lost lives, the broken communities, synagogues desecrated and set on fire, the sacred scrolls burned and turned to ash, the children, 1.5 million of them, an entire murdered generation. What our enemies killed, we keep alive in the only way we can, in our minds, our memories, and our memorial prayers. There are cultures that forget the past, and there are cultures that are held captive by the past. We do neither. We carry the past with us as we carry the memory of the Shoah with us for as long as the Jewish people exists, as Moses carried the bones of Joseph, and as the Levites carried the fragments of the shattered tablets of stone. Those fragments of memory help make us who we are. We live for what they died for. When we walk tall as Jews, showing we are not afraid, refusing to be intimidated by the anti-Semitism that is still with us, we honor their memories. And then he finishes these remarks by saying, and he said this a few years ago, so today we say to the souls of those our people lost in Europe's dark night, we will never forget you. We will never cease to mourn you. We will not let you down until Jews can walk the world without fear, witnesses against those who choose death, to the God of life who told us, choose life. Remembering, as we know, can bring tears and pain. As many on the call will know, many of the people on the call are survivors themselves, including our guest of honor. But memory can also bring resilience and hope for the future. Therefore, behind me, I have 3 candles, and I would like to light 3 candles for the past, the present, and the future. And I don't know if you can see, but there's a small little violin there next to my candles. So we'll get to that in a moment. In a moment, we're going to recite the Kaddish, and we're going to put the words up for you. I just wanted to make a very brief comment that the Kaddish is the prayer that we say as Jews when we remember the dead. But the mysterious thing about the Kaddish is that there's no mention of the dead in the Kaddish, which has always been a very interesting thing. I like to think of the Kaddish as a mysterious and beautiful circle between heaven and earth. We are comforting God, and God comforts us. From pain, we move to hope, from yesterday to tomorrow. So if you'd like to join me in the reciting of the Kaddish, we put the words up on the screen for you. Some people prefer to stand if you would like, if it's your custom. I'm not going to stand because otherwise you won't see me, but it's totally up to you. And again, this is an affirmation of that circle of life, really, because this is about life. The Kaddish is really about life. Yit gadal v'yit kadash shemei rabbah. Bi'alma divra chirute v'yamlich malchute. B'chayechon uvyomechon uvchaye dechol beit Yisrael. Ba'agala uvizman kariv v'imru amen. Yehi shmei rabba mevarach le'alam u'l'olmei olmaya. Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitramam v'yitnaseh. V'yitadar v'yitaleh v'yitalal. Shemei dekudesha barichu. Le'ela min kol birchata v'shirata. Tush bechata v'nechamata. Da'amiran bi'alma v'imru amen. I think it cut something off there. I'm sorry. Oseh shalom b'imromav, hu ya'aseh shalom, aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael, v'imru amen. And in memory of the 6 million who we will never forget, we say that prayer tonight. And again, from pain, we move to hope, from yesterday to tomorrow. We will learn tonight about an inspiring program, speaking of tomorrow, Violins of Hope. And in a few moments, you will meet the chairwoman of the Violins of Hope, Los Angeles County, Suzanne Reto. I'm going to give you a little background about Suzanne. There's a lot to say about her. And here she is right now on your screen. There she is. And I'm just going to mention a few things about her. She's done so many extraordinary things in her life. I don't think I could cover them in the few minutes that I have, because I really want to give the time to her. But I think she'll probably fill in some things, certainly about herself and also certainly about the program. Suzanne is a child survivor of the Holocaust, and she's dedicated her life to preserving history and educating future generations through various programs and projects. And now, of course, she is the chairperson of this wonderful, amazing program and the Los Angeles chapter of this program, continuing to engage in educating both Jews and non-Jews, young and old, about history, culture, and music. She's an award-winning author, speaker, world traveler, and has sat on the boards of so many wonderful organizations, I can't even list them all. She also is a frequent speaker and educator at the Los Angeles Museum of the Holocaust in LA, right near where I grew up, by the way. I went to high school down the street, and she works tirelessly for educating our next generation in the messages of the Holocaust. Her childhood experiences and her ultimate escape from communist Hungary in the late 1950s left Suzanne with an unwavering spirit of optimism and perseverance. She grew up in Australia, lived on Guam while her husband served in the US Navy, and has traveled the world. Her writings have been featured in major US newspapers and internet magazines and websites. She has appeared on television and radio in the US and Canada. Her book, Pursuit of Freedom, has been designated as recommended reading for young people. So she's pretty impressive. And you will meet her momentarily. But before you do, before we meet her and hear from her directly, We're going to learn a little bit more about this extraordinary program in a short film about Violins of Hope, which will give you some wonderful background about how it came to be. So Ruby, if you can show us the film.
They played their violins in the filthy ghettos, squalid work camps in Nazi Germany. They played as they felt. Neighbors and strangers walked to their deaths. They played for their lives. And to get older.
So this is Ruby in Santa Barbara here. She's just a few blocks.
Look, the Nazis are not anymore. The violins, they are. And the violin are playing. And when they are playing, it is victory. And when it is victory, you cannot take it away. One day came to me a guy, he played on the way to the chamber, gas chamber. He stopped playing after the war. And as he has a grandchild, he wanted to repair the violin that he will play. I opened the violin. I remember there was inside black powder because he was playing beside the crematorium and beside all these horrible places. And I asked him questions, and he told me about what happened there. He told me that people that played, they have seen the family going to the gas chamber. They threw the violin, they were going together with them. They could not pray. The violin prayed for them. This is the most difficult time of my life. When I ask my mother, where is my grandfather, where is my grandmother, where is my aunts, where all the family, she used to take a book of Vilna to show me the Ponar forest where they killed all the Jewish people, 80,000 people, and say, here is your family.
Amnon Weinstein's Tel Aviv shop is filled with violins, violas, and cellos in various states of repair, and he reckons he and his son Avshalom have restored about 60 instruments so far as part of a project he calls the Violins of Hope.
This is a violin that it took me 1 year and a half to restore from scratches. Beautiful violin with 5 Star of David, 1, 2, 3, 4, and the beautiful one on the back. Going to Cleveland to the concert. And the last one, Auschwitz violin. This violin, what we know, The man who played on it played in the Auschwitz orchestra, men orchestra, the big orchestra that was every day in the morning and in the evening playing, not far away from the sign Arbeit macht frei.
Amnon Weinstein is proud whenever people get to see the violins and learn about their history. But he's especially happy when these instruments are played for live audiences.
The violins are to play on, not to be like a furniture. That's very good for the violin. You can keep them for 400 or 500 years, but violin have to speak. And the most important part of the life of a violin is to be played in concert, and then they can tell stories.
The Violins of Hope are Holocaust survivors. Scarred by the war years, they were silent for decades, but now they have music to play. And Amnon Weinstein says each one has a story to tell.
Getting all these instruments, they are in very, very condition. Some they suffered a lot in the Holocaust. Some suffered a lot because people were putting them in the attic. They didn't want violin anymore.
Though their owners' voices were silenced by hatred and cruelty, Amnon vowed these violins would one day speak for them. In 2015, the violins did speak, triumphantly. Played by student musicians. And a world-renowned violin virtuoso inside a classroom.
Each violin that you are going to play is for millions of people that are dead. The sound that you heard today, that is victory. And each concert is a victory.
Good evening, everybody, and I am so sorry about the Zoom reception. And as difficult as it was, I hope you got enough of a feeling for the program and how amazing it is. And first of all, thank you, Ruth and Ruby, for inviting me. It's my great pleasure to be here, especially on Erev Yom HaShoah, which is a very, very meaningful day for all of us survivors. And this morning, I started the day by a program from Israel for Israeli Museum, the Museum of Diaspora, which just recently reopened. And believe it or not, I was very concerned for the Zoom internet issues. And for about an hour, it went perfectly. And the last 5 minutes, there was a little bit of a hiccup. So with Zoom, you never know, but it's really the second best to being in real person and being part of it. The day of Yom HaShoah is very important and very meaningful because every year there are less and less of us. And I'm one of the child survivors, so I'm one of the younger ones. I was born during the Holocaust. And I will tell you a little bit just to introduce you to the fact what makes Violins of Hope so meaningful and so important for me to be part of, or actually to chair it for Los Angeles County. But Yom HaShoah is an amazing day to remember because we must reserve memory. At the same time, for me, it's very important to look at it positively. And while we reserve memory, we need to promote the better tomorrow, and we need to turn tragedy to triumph. For me, the cup is never half empty, it's always half full, and I live my life accordingly. And it really is an important way of looking at things optimistically rather than the other way. And just to give you a little background, I think Ruth mentioned a couple of words. I was born, believe it or not, just 6 days before the Nazi invasion of Hungary. And you may remember Hungary was invaded in 1944 March. And in those days, mothers were still in the hospital. And it was a very, very difficult time, especially for my mother, who didn't have her husband, my father, around because he was already taken to the more or less Nazi influenced military of Hungary. So he wasn't there. And my mother spent her last few weeks at her parents'. And that day, March 19th, on a Sunday, there was huge commotion at the hospital and nobody knew what was happening. And by the end of the day, finally, my mother was able to corner a nurse who was willing to say a few words. And she said the Nazis invaded Hungary that morning. And as if that wasn't enough, they established their headquarters on the grounds of the hospital. Well, you can just imagine being a mother, and most of us grandmothers, you can imagine what it felt like. My mother thought, well, will we ever get out of here? And if we do, how? Well, like an angel from heaven, her doctor walked in who knew her circumstances and said, I arranged for an ambulance to take you home to your parents. And in addition to the ambulance, I ordered a sign for it, infectious disease. Well, you adults will know, and I often speak to youngsters, I kind of have to explain, but nobody wanted to be near an infectious disease person in a car. So naturally, the streets like the Red Sea parted for us, and we were able to get back to my grandparents. And that was my very first attempt at survival at age 7 days. So you know that survival means a great deal to me. And every day I think of how grateful I am. And there were a couple of other incidents where survival is a very meaningful thing. And I want you to know that the violins of the Violins of Hope are survivors themselves. And they represent the indestructible spirit of Holocaust survivors who are resilient, resistant, but always hopeful. And this is the way I live my life. And when the Violins of Hope program was presented to me by a friend, I jumped with joy because I thought this was the greatest thing I could do to give back to the community for all my gratefulness and do something of educating youngsters in a unique way. It's not a textbook education, and we know kids are not responsive to much of that. And today they're so jaded with people dying. You know, when they play their video games, thousands of people dying doesn't really mean that much to them. So trying to teach the Holocaust in a way that will reach them is difficult. And when I heard the Violins of Hope program, I thought this was just exactly what the doctor ordered. So to tell you the history of it, it came to me by a friend who happens to be my co-chair for the Violins of Hope Los Angeles program. And she said, do you know anything about it? And I said, no, but it didn't take more than a couple of minutes to look up the person that you saw in the film, the young one.
To support the Freedom from Religion Foundation.
the young person, Avshalom Avshi, who's the son of Amnon Weinstein. And I immediately reached out to him via email, and we exchanged emails. And within a day or two, I was in. It's kind of an unusual program because every city where the violins happen to appear, wherever they're asked to be part of, uh, they are presented from a very different perspective. It has appeared in Cleveland was the first time, and it was from a musical standpoint. And other cities have it from a different, everybody has a different slant or a different bias. For me, being a survivor, educating the next generations is the most important. And using the violins and an educational teaching tool was incredibly important. And I'm always looking for new ways and new venues to find opportunities to teach youngsters. And this I thought was the greatest way. So to tell you a little bit about the program itself, as you could see, Amnon Weinstein, who was in the video, and I'm so sorry that the video was so interrupted by internet delays. But if you would like to go on the website, Violins of Hope Los Angeles.org, you will have a better understanding from written material and other kind of things. So you will be able to get a better handle on the program. But the program consists of wherever it goes, it consists of a three-part program. One is music, which is concerts and presentations in homes and salons. Then the second part, which for me was very important, the educational process, where we go to schools and we present not the stories of the people during the Holocaust, but the stories of the violins. Because as we said, the violins themselves are survivors. And we tell them what they went through. Like you heard from Amnon, where a man who brought the violin to him had when he opened it up, had black powder in it. This man was playing in the camps during all those problems and next to the crematorium, and the black dust settled in his violin. So it has a great deal of meaning. Every violin means something else. After the war, after the Holocaust, a lot of the violinist European musicians had settled in Palestine. As a matter of fact, some of you may be aware of the original Palestine Symphony, which Bronislaw Huberman, the Polish violinist, began. He wanted to rescue musicians who were expelled from their orchestras, and he decided to create an incredible Israeli phenomenon, create and found the Israeli Symphony in 1935-36. This was his life's mission, and he gave up his own performing career. So many of these musicians who ended up going to Palestine to be part of the orchestra were part of the customer base of the Weinstein workshop. And many of these people brought their violins in after the Holocaust. And since many of the instruments were German-made violins, they no longer wanted to play on them. They brought it into him, and actually it was at first, the first generation was his father, then Amnon, and the young Avshi that you saw both two generations on the film. And after a while, he had violin on top of violin, and he just didn't quite know what to do with it. And one day somebody brought in a violin and said, I need you to take it from me. I want you to buy it, take it, whatever. And Amnon said, I'm sorry, but I have too many already. As you can see, I have it hanging all over the wall. I cannot take it. So the man said, if you don't take it, I'm going to burn it or beat it up. Well, with that kind of a response, he said, okay, don't worry. I'll take it. Just leave it and I'll keep it in good hands. Well, he realized that these violins needed to be used in a more beneficial way. He couldn't just have it in his workshop, but it was very hard for him to handle them because 400 members of his own family perished in the Holocaust in Poland. So he wasn't able to touch them or do anything with them until the middle 90s, at which time he realized that this was such an opportunity that he cannot pass it up, and he's going to repair them, restore them, and use them for the benefit of future generations. Well, at that point, the Violins of Hope program was found, and it traveled to very few places, mostly in the US, starting in 2015. And it has been in Berlin, playing with the Berlin Philharmonic, but generally speaking, in the US, in various cities, always smaller cities than Los Angeles. Los Angeles is the first and the biggest and the most difficult one. But at any rate, I attempted to do and bring it to Los Angeles and create this program in as many ways as I could. And I had planned a 5-week program, if you can imagine, with concerts, various musical events, lots and lots of educational programs, and an exhibit at the Los Angeles Holocaust Museum. Because it's also very important to have people and in-person contact with these instruments, and especially when musicians tend to hold it, they feel like the instrument is vibrating in their hand, and everybody says, "Oh my God, I feel the vibration of the person who played on it." So it is important to be able to give the in-person experience for young people as well as adults at the museum. So a 5-week program was planned, and last year, in the middle of March, exactly 1 week before the opening night, we were shut down and suspended, as we all know. The experience was not delightful, but you know what? You have to go on. Survival and hope is the name of the game. And things were kind of shut down, as we all know, for the first little bit. And then
I have video and audio. Yeah, we'll just leave and try.
people began to work with it, and I began to reschedule whatever. Then we rescheduled the opening night for January 14th of 2021 in the hopes that things will quiet down, and starting March and April and the planning, it'll definitely be fine by January. Well, how wrong we were. However, in January, I decided to keep that date of the rescheduled opening night and presented a gala. And I would love for you to be able to see it. If you go on YouTube, Violins of Hope Los Angeles Gala, you'll be able to see the program, a little over an hour, and an amazing program recreating some of the participants in the program, and will give you a really in-depth visualization of what this program means, the breadth and depth of it. So this was in January, and since then, I keep having different programs just to keep the excitement alive and know that we are coming back. And this next week, on April 15th, we will have the next program. And if you go on the website, Violins of Hope, losangeles.org, you'd be able to sign up for the program. It will be an amazing evening. As I mentioned to you, the creation of the Palestine Symphony, which after the creation of Israel became the Israel Philharmonic Orchestra. The film Orchestra of Exiles will be the story of this Bronislaw Huberman and the orchestra that he created, which is now one of the leading orchestras in the world. And in addition to seeing the film, which is a little over an hour, we will have an opportunity to discuss and have a Zoom conversation with the director producer of the film. So you'll have a very insightful discussion about how he created it and did it. The film is incredible. We saw it a few years ago when it first came out, and it is a memorable film as well as a very interesting story. So before we go any further, and I'm just looking at the time, I could talk for an hour more if you like, but I have to be interrupted because I want to introduce you to an amazing musician who's been my left and right hand wherever we go to present. And I'd like to introduce you to Jonathan Rubin, who will play a few pieces for you. And he will tell you a little bit about what he plays. But he, in addition to being a wonderful musician, he's a gem of a guy. So here it is. You're on, Jonathan.
Thank you. Thank you so much. It is such an honor and a pleasure to be part of this. And it's really the fulfillment as a Jewish violinist growing up. You know, my heroes were Yitzhak Perlman and Yasha Heifetz. Nothing against Sandy Koufax, but you know, Yitzhak Perlman really speaks my language. He's certainly one of my heroes. And so the opportunity to be a part of this and make the violin relevant and have these violins from the Holocaust actually have a voice and speak, I think is more than interesting. I think it's incredibly important and crucial to telling the story and the stories of the Holocaust. The first piece I'm going to play, actually, speaking of Yitzhak Perlman, is the theme from Schindler's List. And this piece, of course, was written for the movie by John Williams and specifically for Yitzhak Perlman, my hero, to play. And so it's a great honor and pleasure for me to play it for you. So I'm going to switch from Schindler's List in a similar traditional vein. A very popular old Yiddish melody and very popular during the time of the Holocaust and from that time. um, is a tune called Oifen Pripachik, which translates to around the fireplace. And it's the story of a father teaching the Aleph Bet, the alphabet, to his young son. And this is Oifen Pripachik. So for the last 6 or 7 years, I've had the great honor and privilege of attending APAC events in Southern California, and I've had the privilege to play at several of them, and playing Hatikva at an APAC event really is an incredibly emotional experience for me. I have over 100 cousins, first, second, and third cousins that live in Israel, and so it's very emotional for me to have that honor and privilege. And when I've played there in the past, it's happened a few different ways. There have been times when I played it just by myself, and people, of course, could sing along if they liked. A few times I've played it with singers, and about 3 or 4 years ago, they told me that we would be performing it and someone would be leading the Hatikva, but we would accompany them, which of course is absolutely fine and delightful. I just want to get this angle. There we go. And I said, like always, when we play with the singer, it's very important that we are literally on the same page. So we need to know what key would the singer, like for us to play it in. And I've learned from experience that's really a very important step. I had the experience where the singer said, "Oh, the way you play it is fine. I have the recording of when you played it last time. It's just fine." And it turned out it wasn't fine because they wanted to start on one note, I wanted to start on another, and we had that sort of thing. So I know the best practice really is we need to be, work as a team. And I said, "Please tell me." And they said, "Well, actually, the person who's going to be leading Hatikva is actually not a singer." And I said, "Okay, that's fine. I mean, we can start on any note. It would be helpful to know a little bit more." And so I did find out the story, and she actually told her story at the APAC event, and it was pretty amazing. So the person who led the Hatikva, her name is Moran Samuel, and she's an athlete, a professional athlete in Israel, gold medal winning athlete. When she was in her 20s, she actually suffered a spinal stroke, which forever, of course, changed her life and changed her athletic career. She became a paraplegic, and she has such an incredible spirit. She actually became a gold medal winner in the Paralympic Games, which are Olympic Games for paraplegics. And she's really incredible. She won the gold medal in Italy. I forget how many years ago now, but you can certainly, it's on YouTube. And I know there have been many instances in the past, in the regular Olympics and in other international events where Israeli athletes and Israeli participants are snubbed by other athletes. For example, judo matches where the Iranian athlete will refuse to shake hands or refuse to compete against the Israeli athlete. Anyway, at these Paralympic Games where Moran Samuel won the gold medal, when it came time, it was in Italy, and when it came time to play the national anthem of the gold medal winner, they started playing music, which quickly became apparent it was not Hatikva, it was not the Israeli national anthem. She stopped them, she took a microphone, and she sang Hatikva, and she's not a singer. But I have to say, her rendition of Hatikva, I think is pretty amazing and pretty special. And it was an incredible honor to accompany her at APAC and have her sing Hatikva. And so I'm going to leave you with my rendition of Hatikva as I had
You
the honor
hear?
to accompany.
Good. So we're gonna put us on the video.
Thank you so much, Jonathan. It was just wonderful, wonderful to have you there. And thank you for always being part of it. And I would just like to say a few more words before we open for questions, because I could speak for 2 more hours, but I know I don't have that much time. But I just would like to implore upon you that these violins will outlive us and they will be the storytellers for the future. So all of these violins are precious, precious instruments. I happen to have a non-playable, which to me is very precious because I don't play the violin, but I love this instrument and I think I'm going to keep it because I have grown so attached to it as if my little baby. This is a violin that is not playable and it will not be restored because of what you can see, this beautiful mother of pearl inlay, and they would have to tear it apart and would lose the beauty of the instrument. In addition, this is one of the klezmer instruments because not only the front of it is beautifully adorned, but turning it around, you will see a beautiful mother of pearl Magen David on it. It's a beautiful instrument, and you will also note the back of it is a little lighter in color than the front, because in the old shtetl homes, violins were the adornment for the walls, and many times they were hanging on the wall, and the sun came through and bleached the wood. And someone jokingly said, when you visited a home in the Polish, Russian shtetls, you could see how many men there were in the household, depending on the number of violins that were hanging on the wall, because everybody was playing. And klezmer culture was also diminished during World War II, and it's been enjoying a revival starting in the 70s, and it's one of the joyful part of the violin music, and it is very much part of Jewish life. For example, Fiddler on the Roof and all of that. So violin is a very important part of Jewish culture, Jewish life. And perhaps I'll ask you a question, and unfortunately, I can't get the direct answer. Do you know why the violin is probably the most important instrument in Jewish life? Well, the reason is that it's portable. When people were taken to the camps, they could just put it under their arm and they were able to go. And these instruments were saviors for many people. For some people, it prolonged their lives. For others, it saved their lives. The Nazis, as we said earlier in the film, they had orchestras. All the main camps had orchestras. And believe it or not, in Auschwitz, there was even a women's orchestra. And many of the musicians played and composed for the pleasure of the Nazis. So at this point, I hope I gave you a little bit of an introduction to the Violins of Hope. And I hope you will go on the website, violinsofhopelosangeles.org. And if you're interested in participating in the movie and discussion with the producer next Thursday, please go on. You'll be able to purchase tickets and enjoy it. It'll be a phenomenal evening. And at this point, I hope there was somebody in the chat. I looked at one lady whose uncle's violin was restored in Israel and actually is in Mexico City. And now it has become part of the Violins of Hope collection. Yes, it is part of the violin. I have heard of that particular one. And to tell you how amazing life is, almost every city the violins have visited, someone had come up with a violin that belonged to a family member, and they donated to the Violins of Hope project. So much so, I had an interesting episode maybe a year ago where I was watching a kinder transport film, and there was a little 6-year-old boy who was so much part of the kinder transport story. And I thought, well, I wonder if there is a kinder transport violin, because many of the kids took their violins. And when I called Avshi, he said, no, I don't have one, but you never know. Believe it or not, 2 weeks later, he called and he said, I just got one from Phoenix. Someone whose family member lived in Phoenix, escaped with the kinder transport and had a violin. And now it's part of the Violins of Hope collection. So this collection keeps growing. And so many people have given it because they felt that it was the most wonderful opportunity to leave a legacy. So at this point, I would love to answer any questions you may have. Let me read it. Shall I read the questions or you will call them out?
Do them, Suzanne. Suzanne, I just wanted to follow up on what you were just talking about from our community member, Molly Presser. She said that her uncle survived Auschwitz because of his violin. And she said that he was honored in Mexico City and his violin was restored in Israel. And she said the name of the program was Instruments of Hope. So that's the same, it's the same program, yes? Okay.
It is Violins of Hope, and that's what I was answering. It maybe didn't do it directly, but yes, it is part of it. And depending on where it is or what history the instrument has, it's just an amazing, amazing story. And there is a book actually called Violins of Hope, written by James Grimes, a musicologist, where he highlights about 6 of the most prominent ones, or the ones with the most interesting histories. It is amazing because some of these instruments went through unbelievable experiences, and for many of them, the instrument and the playing helped the owner survive the worst of times.
Yeah, he was highlighted on your gala video, and I would highly recommend the book to everybody present tonight if you're interested, because he was a very moving speaker. If you're interested in that book, we can get the name of it to you. He's a musicologist, I think, at University of North Carolina, right?
North Carolina, yes, yeah. North Carolina. If any of you are planning to watch the YouTube video of the January 14th, you will be able to see him and hear his story, highlighting some of the amazing stories in his book. And it's on YouTube, Violins of Hope Los Angeles Gala. And enjoy it. Please watch it. And it is an amazing story. And I think it's the only way you get the feeling is if you see and hear some of it. And I think Jonathan added to the pleasure of this program. Any other questions?
Yeah, Suzanne, there was another question from another community member. Lonnie Wolf wanted to know, how did the program identify where the violins came from in Europe?
Well, generally speaking, a family member is the one who donated, or the violins, or actually, there are a couple of cellos and a couple of violas, but both of them are much bigger, and the violin is the most portable, as we know. Either a family member took it to the workshop, or as I mentioned earlier, many of the musicians who were part of the original violins, the original Palestine Symphony, who were expelled from their orchestras in their local countries, went to Israel, and after the war, they just didn't want to play on those instruments. Contrary to that, there were some who became major players within the orchestra, and naturally they kept on playing. But very often, family members or people themselves gave the instrument with the stories attached.
Okay, thank you for that. I know it's almost time to go. Our time is almost up. But I'm just going to end with one question of my own, and that is, maybe it's a hard question. But if you had to say, and as a survivor too, what's been the most moving story or experience that you can share in your capacity as chairperson of this program that you've come across? Either a story of a violin or a player, or what do you think?
Well, having just lived through the pandemic for a year, I have often been despondent, and the Violins of Hope message is what kept me going, because the hope represented by the violins, the survival, the resilience, and their way of describing what went on. And these instruments will be our storytellers, and they have become, with the restoration, they have become the survivors that came alive. And many of these instruments that were silenced during the war have now gotten their voice back, and they're singing through the sound of music to the world. So the hope, the word hope itself is what kept me going, because it was very disappointing, as you can imagine, having the program come to a standstill. And every time I got under a little depressed, I said, well, the hope represented in the Violins of Hope is what's going to keep me going. And that's really what helped a great deal. And I'm a positive person, so I always think of a better tomorrow. My parents always instilled in me, don't let the negative break you, let it strengthen you. And that has been my motto all my life. And that's the way I think we have to live. And we have to be grateful for everything we have.
Thank you so much, Suzanne. It's so inspiring, and I think that everybody on the call will agree that music is really a language of hope. Music is a language of love. It's a language of community. And I think that, Zoom issues notwithstanding, this was forget about that. This was a hopeful way to spend Yom HaShoah together. And I just think that, we have to remember that the words of Hatikva, the national anthem of Israel, is the hope. So, it's all about hope, and it's all about looking forward. And you're so inspiring, and the program is inspiring. And as we look forward to the end of the pandemic, I hope that we can do this in person next year and bring you to Santa Barbara, where we can all meet you in person. Maybe Jonathan can come. My sister was on the call earlier, Cantor Aronoff, and she knows you, Jonathan. So she had to go lead the minyan at her synagogue. But anyway, she thinks you're amazing. We all think you're amazing, and we all got a little verklempt as we listen to you play. So thank you so much.
My pleasure. And just to remind you, in the hopes, we will be back probably the end of November. The violins are due back, and perhaps we can plan on an evening, a performance, or whatever will fit in. And it'll be my great pleasure to accommodate the program, because, nothing brings warmth to my heart than people enjoying and appreciating it.
That's wonderful.
So thank you so much. And
Thank
thank you, Jonathan. And goodbye, everybody.
Thank you all for coming and joining us. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Very inspirational. Good night, everyone.
Thank
Good
you,
night.
Ruth.